Hi, I'm Tina, and this is the Sisterhood Sleuths podcast created by Cathy Warshaw of Secret Societies and the Sisterhood Sleuths, where we don't just accept what we're told, we question it. Because secrets are everywhere, and curiosity is the key. Let me ask you something. What if one question could change everything? Not a complicated question, not a long one, a simple one, but asked at the right moment in the right way. It reveals more than anything else. Most people ask questions every day, but they don't ask the right ones. They ask surface questions. What happened? Where were you? Did you do this? Questions that get answers, but not truth. Because here's the truth. People can answer questions without telling you anything real. That's where most people stop. They hear an answer and they accept it. But sleuths, they don't stop at the first answer. They go deeper. Because the right question doesn't just get a response. It reveals something hidden, something unspoken, something real. Let's slow this down. Imagine you're in a conversation. You ask a question, the person answers, everything seems fine. But something still feels incomplete. That's your signal. Not that the answer is wrong, but that it's not the whole truth. And this is where everything shifts, because most people move on. They think, I got my answer, but you don't. Not anymore. Because now you know something important. The first answer is rarely the full story. Now imagine Chloe in that moment. She doesn't ask louder questions. She asks better ones. Instead of, what happened? She might ask, what made that happen? Do you feel the difference? One asks for an event. The other asks for a cause. And cause is where truth lives. Now Lily would take it further. She would ask questions that seem simple, but aren't. Questions that make people think, pause, reconsider. Because when someone has to think, they're no longer responding automatically. They're revealing something real. Now let's go deeper. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to answer a direct question? Did you do this? Yes or no? Simple. But what happens when the question changes? Why did you do this? Now it's different. Now it requires thought, explanation, reflection. And that's where cracks appear. Because it's harder to control a deeper answer, harder to keep everything aligned. And in those moments, clues appear. Now let's bring in Gil. Gil doesn't just ask questions. He watches what happens after he asks them. The pause, the reaction, the shift in tone. Because the answer is only part of the information. The response is everything else. That's where truth hides. Not just in what people say, in how they say it. Now let's make this real. You're talking to someone. You ask, where were you earlier? They answer quickly, just out. Simple. Most people would accept that. But you ask a different question. What were you doing? Now there's a pause. Not long, but noticeable. That pause, that's information. Not proof, but a signal. Something in that moment required thought, adjustment, and that's where the awareness begins. Now here's something important. The goal is not to trap people. It's to understand. Because questioning isn't about control. It's about clarity. Now Yuki would approach this differently. She would look at questions like inputs. What you ask determines what you get. If you ask shallow questions, you get shallow answers. If you ask deeper questions, you get deeper insight. That's the system. And once you understand it, you can use it. Now let's go deeper again. The most powerful question is not always spoken out loud. Sometimes it's the question you ask yourself. What am I not seeing? That question changes everything because it shifts your focus from what's obvious to what's missing. And what's missing is often more important than what's there. Now May would take this further. She would ask, what doesn't make sense here? Not what happened, what doesn't align. Because misalignment points to something deeper, something hidden. Now Aoife would expand this. She would ask, what pattern is forming? Because one moment is just a moment, but repeated moments, that's a pattern. And patterns tell the truth. Now let's bring this back to you. You're in a situation, you hear something, you see something, and now, instead of accepting it, you ask one more question. Not aggressively, not obviously, just enough to go deeper. And that one question changes what you see. Because now, you're not just listening, you're understanding. That's the shift. From hearing answers to uncovering truth. And once you learn how to do that, you can't go back. Because now, every conversation becomes clearer. Every situation reveals more. And every answer becomes a starting point, not an ending. In part 2, we'll go deeper into how to ask the right questions at the right time. Because timing matters. And one question asked at the right moment can reveal everything. Now let's go further, because asking the right question is only part of it. The real power? When you ask it. Timing changes everything. You can ask the perfect question at the wrong time and get nothing. Or you can ask a simple question at the right moment and reveal everything. Let's slow this down. Imagine you're in a conversation. Everything is flowing, easy, predictable. If you ask a deep question too early, what happens? The person deflects. They give a surface answer, they avoid going deeper. Not because they're hiding something, because the moment isn't ready. Now imagine waiting. You listen, you observe, you let the conversation build. And then there's a shift, a pause, a hesitation, a small inconsistency. That's your moment. Not before, right here. That's when you ask. Because now, the question lands differently. Now it matters. Now it reaches something real. Chloe understands this instinctively. She doesn't rush questions. She lets the moment develop because she knows something important. People reveal more over time, not all at once. So she waits, not passively, actively observing. And when the moment is right, she asks. Now Lily would approach this with precision. She watches patterns in conversation. When does the person hesitate? When do they become more careful? When do they shift their tone? Because those moments are openings. And questions asked during openings go deeper. Now let's bring in something critical. Silence. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. They rush to fill it. They ask another question. They change the subject, they move on. But silence is one of the most powerful tools you have. Because when you ask a question and then stay silent, you create space. And in that space, people fill it. Not always with words, sometimes with behavior, sometimes with hesitation, sometimes with more than they intended to say. That's where truth appears. Now let's make this real. You ask a question. What made you decide that? They start to answer, then pause. Most people would jump in, clarify, rephrase, help them, but you don't. You stay silent. And that silence pulls more information out. Because now they have to continue. And in continuing, they reveal more. That's timing. Now Gil would use this strategically. He knows that pressure reveals truth, but not aggressive pressure, subtle pressure. A well-placed question, a pause, a moment that requires a real answer. Because when people are uncomfortable, they control what they say. When they're slightly uncomfortable, they reveal more. That's the balance. Not pushing too hard, just enough to create clarity. Now let's go deeper. There's another kind of timing, internal timing, when you ask yourself a question. Because sometimes the most important answers don't come from others. They come from you, but only if you ask at the right moment. Have you ever tried to force an answer, to figure something out immediately and it didn't work? Because you weren't ready to see it yet. That's timing. Now imagine asking the same question later, after observing more, after thinking, after experiencing more. Now the answer is clear. Not because the question changed, because the moment did. That's why patience matters. Not waiting for no reason, waiting for clarity. Now, Yuki would approach this like a system. Input, timing, output. If you input the right question at the wrong time, the output is weak. If you input it at the right time, the output is strong, clear. That's how systems work. And conversations are systems. Now, May would go even deeper. She would ask, what is the person ready to reveal? Because people don't always hide things. Sometimes they just aren't ready to say them. And if you ask too early, you get nothing. But if you wait, observe, and ask at the right moment, you get the truth. That's the difference. Now, Aoife would expand this even further. She would look at timing over patterns, not just one moment, many. When does the person open up? When do they close off? When do they shift? Because timing isn't random, it follows patterns. And if you see those patterns, you know when to ask. Now let's bring this back to you. You're in a conversation. You're listening, observing, and now you're not rushing. You're waiting for the right moment. And when it appears, you ask. Not many questions, just one, but the right one. And suddenly, the conversation changes. It deepens. It reveals something new, something real. That's the power. Not in asking more, in asking better at the right time. And once you understand that, everything shifts. Because now, you're not just part of the conversation. You're guiding it, quietly, intentionally. And that's where real understanding begins. In part 3, we bring this all together. What it looks like when you consistently ask the right questions at the right time, and how it transforms the way you see people, situations, and truth itself. Because one question can change everything. Now you understand something most people never do. Questions are not just about getting answers. They're about revealing truth. And once you learn how to ask the right question at the right time, you stop moving through the world blindly. You start seeing clearly, because now every answer becomes a doorway, not an ending, a beginning. Let's go back to that moment. You're in a conversation. You notice something, a hesitation, a shift, a detail that doesn't align. You don't ignore it. You don't rush. You wait. And then you ask one question, simple, focused, and everything changes. Because now, you're not just hearing words. You're seeing what's behind them. That's the shift, from surface to depth. Now let's step into this like a real sleuth. Chloe doesn't ask questions to fill space. She asks to uncover something. Every question has purpose, not random, intentional. Because she knows something important. The quality of your questions determines the quality of your understanding. Now Lily would take this even further. She wouldn't just ask one question. She would build on it, carefully. Each question connected to the last, not jumping around, following a path. Because one question opens a door, the next one shows you what's inside, and the next reveals what's hidden deeper. That's how you uncover truth. Not all at once, step by step. Now Gil uses questions as strategy. He's not just asking to understand, he's asking to see how someone responds. Because response reveals intention. Not just what people say, how they handle being questioned. Do they stay consistent? Do they shift? Do they avoid? Those reactions are information. And that information is often more valuable than the answer itself. Now let's go deeper. Because here's where most people struggle. They stop too soon. They get one answer and they move on. They think, that makes sense. But they don't ask, does it really? The second question is where everything changes. Because the first answer is often the surface. The second question goes deeper. And that's where truth begins to reveal itself. Now let's bring in Yuki. Yuki doesn't accept answers immediately. She tests them. If something is true, it holds. If it's not, it breaks. And questions are how you test it. Not aggressively, carefully, consistently. because truth doesn't need to be defended. It stands on its own. Now, May would take this even further. She would ask, what's missing? Because answers often focus on what's included, but what's missing can be even more important. What wasn't said, what wasn't explained, what was avoided? That's where deeper truth lives. Now, Aoife would connect everything. Not just one conversation, many. She would look at patterns over time. Are the answers consistent? Do they change? Do they align with what's actually happening? Because one answer can be misleading, but patterns don't lie. And once you see the pattern, you understand the truth. Now let's bring this back to you. You're no longer just listening. You're asking, not constantly, intentionally. And that changes everything. Because now, you're not just reacting to information. You're uncovering it. You're guiding it. You're understanding it. And once you reach this level, you don't get lost in confusion. You don't accept things blindly. You don't miss what's right in front of you. Because you know how to look deeper. That's power. Not control over others, control over your understanding. Now here's the truth. You don't need 100 questions. You need the right one, at the right time, with the right awareness. And when you do that, you see things others don't. You understand things others miss. And you move through situations with clarity. That's the transformation. From passive listening to active understanding. From accepting answers to uncovering truth. And once you learn that, you carry it with you everywhere. In conversations, in decisions, in every situation you face. Because questions are not just tools, they're keys. And the right key opens everything. Before we end today's episode, here's your sleuth mission for the week. I want you to notice how often people avoid difficult questions. Not dramatic questions, simple ones. Questions that bring clarity. Questions that slow things down. Questions that make people think. Pay attention to when someone changes the subject, when someone answers without really answering, when a conversation suddenly becomes uncomfortable, or when someone tries to rush past a question too quickly. You do not need to confront anyone. You do not need to argue. Just observe. Just notice. Because investigators understand something important. Sometimes the most important clue is the question people don't want asked. And once you begin noticing those moments, you start seeing conversations differently. You start hearing what's beneath the words. And that's where awareness begins. And in the next episode, we go even deeper. What observant people notice and how they see things others completely miss. Until then, this is the Sisterhood Sleuth Podcast, and I'm Tina, reminding you to stay curious, stay aware, and remember, secrets are everywhere. Curiosity is the key.
This episode was brought to you by Secret Societies and the Sisterhood Sleuths, an award-winning mystery adventure franchise featuring books, podcasts, music, educational programs, puzzles, and a global community for curious minds. Join the conversation with fellow sleuths right now in our official Goodreads Mystery Club. Learn more at sisterhoodsleuths.net.